Let me start by welcoming my guest, Attorney-at-Law and Senior Partner at Hove and Associates, Mr. Farai Hove-Masaisai. He specializes in many fields of law, including international trade, intellectual property, personal injury, law, family, and the area he's here for this morning is immigration. Mr. Masaisai, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Yes, and thank you for the invitation, Rennie.
It is good to have you back with us. The issue between Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica right now, at least two dimensions are attached to this, one being a trade imbalance deeply steeped in Jamaica's import of oil and petroleum products from Trinidad and Tobago. That I will discuss later on. But there is the question of the CSME. As you know, on March 21st, 12 Jamaicans arriving on two different Caribbean Airlines craft landed in Trinidad and Tobago. They were denied entry. Immigration said they are denied entry because they have proved they were not able to prove that they are self-sustainable. Thus, a possibility of them becoming a ward of the state or a liability on the state. You and I, before, discussed this whole question of free movement in the Caribbean and folks understanding or not understanding it. Let us start with what the Caribbean Community Single Market and Economy says on the question of free movement within the region. Would you lay that out for our listeners, please?
Okay, with regards to the CARICOM and free movement of workers, that's skilled workers as well as persons who are qualified, meaning persons with tertiary degrees, as well as, I think, for Trinidad, it's nurses and persons in the art forms, media, and that sort of thing. There is supposed to be free movement of those classes of individuals. So obviously, if it is that you have a degree, that is the easiest way to get to another CARICOM country, if it is you want to trade there. For example, on the last occasion, I gave the example of my wife, who she has a degree in law and wanted to practice in our jurisdiction. And she actually came through the CARICOM skills certificate before we got married. So she had her CARICOM skills certificate. You get it first in your home country, and it allows you to work in the host country for 6 months. All right, and within that 6-month period, it's just a matter of bringing in your documents to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and they validate your documents, and they give you indefinite. They actually give you a stamp in your passport, indefinite leave to remain, for the purpose of working under the CARICOM, the CSME. And that is if you have a degree. The other option would be that if it is that you do not have a degree, or you are not one of the skilled persons that we are looking for, is if you can establish yourself in entrepreneurship. Meaning you will not be a ward on the state because you have your own business. Similarly, you apply for it, your CSME, under the right of establishment in your home jurisdiction. So if you're Jamaican, you apply for it in Jamaica. It is valid in Trinidad for up to 6 months, but you have to show that you can set up a business within our jurisdiction. How you show this? They have a checklist on their website. If you check the Foreign Affairs website, and now I must commend the present administration for merging that Foreign Affairs and National Security with the Minister of Foreign Affairs now being a minister in the Ministry of National Security. That would obviously free up the substantive minister to do more of the national security issues in terms of crime and stuff. But in terms of the CSME and national security is linked. All right, so even though the CSME is under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the immigration has to do their due diligence as well. So it's actually a cabinet-appointed committee that meets, and the members of the committee are persons from Ministry of Trade, persons from Ministry of Foreign Affairs, persons from Ministry of National Security, and actually persons from Labour now. They're bringing the Ministry of Labour. Obviously, in the context of there being a recession in our country, we have to look carefully as to where we admit persons in terms of what skills. But once you have your CSME from your jurisdiction, you're allowed to work in our jurisdiction for up to 6 months, and it's just a matter of regularizing your stay in our jurisdiction within that time period.
Just in case you just tuned in, that voice you're hearing is that of Farai Hove-Masaisai. He is an attorney with a rather interesting history because he's had this sort of situation following him for a while. You were Trinidadian, you studied on the continent.
Correct.
Am I correct on
Yes.
that? And then you went to London, and after London, then you came back here.
Yes.
So you understand this whole thing of navigating
immigration
issues, the CSME. From what you explained just now, a lot of folks say that what happens here is there is ignorance when folks are traveling within the CSME. Therein lies the problem. But from what you just detailed, there is no ambiguity there as far as I am concerned. Is it a question of just interpretation, or is it convenient overlooking?
No, I wouldn't say it's a question of misinterpretation, because the CARICOM heads of government, they meet fairly regularly, at least biannually. There was a recent meeting, I think last month. They had a meeting of the CARICOM heads of government, and these were some of the issues that were raised. The issues of the free movement of CARICOM nationals. But the free movement of CARICOM nationals, it's not as straightforward, say like in the European Union, where you can just move as will. Within the CARICOM, you move within regulations. There are regulations that govern your movement.
Let me hold you back there. So as you mentioned Europe, is this where we have this question of the community law coming in?
Well, we don't have a community law per se.
We do not have one
in the CARICOM. There's CARICOM treaties,
right,
which we would abide by, and we actually adopt the treaties within our Immigration Act.
Okay.
And there is a CARICOM Skills Act as well. With regards to Europe, if I am, say, for example, I am Polish and I want to make a better life for myself in the UK, there is no requirement for me to say I have to go and get this work permit.
So it relates to the European community. That's why it's a community law.
Correct.
But it's not dissimilar to what we have here as in treaties here in CSME.
It's a bit dissimilar in the sense that obviously the EU, they have a European Parliament that passes laws that binds all European countries, all stakeholders. We don't have that. The Federation tried it, but we right now what we operate on is on treaties, and we try to abide by the treaties. With regards to the ambiguity, I suppose I'm an attorney, but in terms of lay persons, it's a matter of going on to the CARICOM website. It is a www.site, so it's available to anyone in any CARICOM country to see if I am going to Trinidad and I do intend to work, or I do intend to establish myself in that jurisdiction, what is the requirements of me. Don't come unprepared. I think it was Friday, I was giving the joke to my wife that when I went to England in 2004, when I went up to England, that was the first time to study law. My mom made me wear on a suit. You know, I was 19 years old and I'm wearing a suit, and I tell her I got searched 4 times in Heathrow Airport because everyone was casual. They traveled casually and that sort of thing. And they probably saying, this is a young boy wearing this suit. You know, she overdressed me. You know, but those immigration officers, I took no offense. They were doing their jobs. You know, and likewise when persons come through Piarco Airport, the immigration officers, they have to do their work, and the burden is on them to make decisions on the spot. You know, so if you are coming through the airport and you're telling me you're here, say for a period of time, say you say I would like to stay for 6 months, because that's the maximum they can put on your stamp in your passport without any official document, meaning any work permit or CARICOM skills certificate. They can allow you to stay up to 6 months. You need to tell them what you're here for. If it is you say you're here for a vacation, then obviously they might ask you where you're staying. And if you can't substantiate where you're staying, or if it is that so say for example, when I went to England, on the first occasion, I went to stay by my uncle. He sent a letter, and he has been in England since he went up on the boat. You know, he went up in the 50s. But he sent a letter to my mother, and it had his address, what his phone number.
And that was used when you got in there, so they
Correct.
understand that you are in fact being taken care of. I want to quickly jump into a couple of areas here, because we've got a couple of guests that will be joining us inside this hour. Farai Hove-Masaisai is our guest. He's an attorney specializing in immigration. Why are we making Jamaica and Jamaica's deportation a major issue? We are talking about diversification. We're talking about an expo that's going on in Jamaica right up till today. It ends today, as a matter of fact. And it's at that expo it was uttered that they may be thinking in terms of boycotting Trinidad and Tobago's products. And just that our listeners know, Jamaica is the 4th largest recipient of Trinidad and Tobago's goods, to the tune of over $2 $500 million US. So it's a big deal for any country in the world, and Trinidad and Tobago not being an exception. Now, let's go to, I am very clear, I think our listeners are, the immigration authorities, they ran their investigation where as against the complainants, which are the 12 Jamaicans who were deported. They arrived in 2 separate craft, just to be very clear. And once you were denied entry by the immigration officials, then you become the responsibility of the carrying craft. In this case, it was Caribbean Airlines. Correct. Caribbean Airlines said they did everything they could to deal with these situations, but the claim by these Jamaicans after the return home is that they were ill-treated, made to lie on the cold ground and to sleep there, and also they were refused food and water. I know you cannot speak to the facts specifically in this case, but as an immigration attorney who has dealt with a number of folks who are in detention centers, etc., have you heard of such a situation for someone who's returned, who was refused entry at the airport?
How long were they at the airport? Do you know?
The immigration law say that they will be handed over and must be returned on the very next available flight.
Okay.
So I'm going to go from the dictate there that we are talking about an overnight at best.
Right. Now, it's not unheard of for persons to have to spend the night in the airport where there's no beds. Even immigration officers themselves, when they have to work long hours, I don't think there's any sleeping quarters. So I suppose in terms of given our relationship with Jamaica in terms of our trade, it would be diplomatic sense to provide some sort of accommodation, temporary accommodation for them. In terms of my experience, I can recall in 2014, our firm, we represented some Jewish nationals from Canada that were coming through our country, and we actually had to go to the High Court for them to provide proper accommodation for them. The state was saying that they were the responsibility of the airline, which is in accordance with the act. But the judge said here, once the state gets involved, the state has to provide accommodation. And that was a matter involving, I think they were saying that the Jews were trying to smuggle children out of Canada to get to Guatemala, but they passed through Trinidad. And they actually stayed in Trinidad for a week. And it happened over the Carnival vacation. So they actually called me Carnival Monday. It's a good thing I don't play mass. And I just went up to Piaco and I saw children on the floor, the cold floor. There were children, elderly people on the floor. And they were there from the Sunday. They came in on the Sunday and I came in on the Monday, probably Monday evening. And we were in court that Monday evening itself. We were before Justice Kokaram, and he ordered the state to provide accommodation, and they had to put them in a hotel.